I have devoted my entire life to diving deep into the secrets behind success, not merely financial success, but holistic success in body, mind, and inner life. And after decades of observation, experience, failures, and rising again, I came to a truth so seemingly simple it felt astonishing. If a person does not learn how to reconnect with themselves through both body and mind, then every effort to rise will be nothing more than a breathless race toward nowhere. Transformation does not begin with an external opportunity. It begins with an awakening from within. In those years when I thought I was on the right track, working relentlessly, trying to carry everything on my shoulders with unbreakable will, I realized I was drifting further and further from something precious: stillness, connection, the quiet wisdom that comes from within, not the applause from the outside. In that very moment, I made a decision to change. Not with a grand plan or a dramatic leap, I began by turning inward. I chose to spend a certain time each morning to move, not to become physically stronger, but to relearn how to master the mental space within me. To me, it wasn't just exercise, it was an inner ritual, a silent commitment to myself, that today I would live with awareness. You can choose any form of movement, a light workout, a short walk, or even a few simple stretches. What matters is not how much you sweat, but whether you are doing it with your full presence. I chose gentle, flowing movements, but with complete focus. With every arm lifted, every step grounded, I followed each sensation running through my body. And amazingly, it was within that seemingly monotonous repetition that I began to uncover a new source of energy, quiet, yet profoundly powerful. At first, my mind was still stirred by unresolved worries, unanswered calls, and goals left unfinished. But then something miraculous happened. With each passing day, my thoughts grew quieter. The spaces between thoughts began to widen. I could hear my breath clearly, feel the rhythm in my chest. And then from deep within, I began to hear something even more important, the call of peace. Not everyone understands this from the beginning. Many will say it's a waste of time to sit in silence every morning or to do something that doesn't produce clear results. But believe me when I say this, it is precisely those things that do not yield immediate outcomes that become the most solid foundations for lasting success. When you start your day by intentionally guiding your body and mind instead of letting the world drag you along, you are recalibrating the most crucial element, your inner state. I always tell my students, if you want to catch the rabbit, don't try to change the rabbit, change yourself. This applies to every field of life. Instead of forcing circumstances, become a version of yourself strong enough to attract the right ones. The way you choose to begin your day, how you care for your body, how deeply you understand your own mind, that is the frequency you send out, and life will respond accordingly. While you might be tired, doubtful, or even lost, but you can still begin. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do anything complicated. You just need to take the first step. Return to your body, listen to it, move with it. And from there you will unlock the door to a wiser mind. Because a well-cared-for body does more than give you health. It becomes the foundation upon which clarity is built. And once your mind becomes clear, the decisions you make will be as sharp and precise as the strikes of a hammer shaping your destiny. I am not saying that moving your body every day is easy, especially in those moments when your mind is still steeped in chaos, when your eyes burn from lack of sleep and your heart is weighed down by lingering doubt. But it is precisely in such moments that the true test lies. Can you begin, despite your emotions, despite the voice of procrastination whispering, just skip today, it's fine? Because only when you choose to act in spite of your inertia do you begin to build the foundation of inner strength. And if you truly want to transform your life in 30 days, there is no more practical path than starting with your own body. To me, the body is not merely a tool for survival, it is a vivid expression of the mind. Conscious movement is how I train my spirit, step by step, breath by breath. It is a physical act, yes, but it is also a deeply spiritual process. where I learn to listen to myself and navigate the energy within. And this doesn't have to be Tai Chi or any classical discipline. It could be a silent walk, a gentle workout, or simply 5 minutes of stretching with full awareness. What matters is that you are present, feeling each movement as a sacred ritual that awakens consciousness. Over the years of study and conversation with hundreds of accomplished individuals across the world, I have come to recognize one astonishing commonality. Those who are truly strong, who genuinely own their destiny, all share a deep connection with their bodies. Not an obsession with physique, but a reverence for the temple in which their soul resides. They do not use their bodies as tools of force, but as loyal companions, walking with them through pressure, anchoring them in clarity amid life's dust storms. And then something strange begins to happen. When you start devoting your presence to your body each morning, a special kind of energy begins to emerge. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it is powerful enough for you to feel that you are no longer a passive character in your own life. You start your day grounded, as if a quiet strength is standing behind you. Decisions become clearer. Challenges feel less threatening, and instead of reacting hastily to the world, you begin to respond from a place of inner depth. On this podcast, I often tell those seeking breakthroughs in life, don't chase transformation in far-off opportunities. Begin with what you do with your body each morning. It is right there that you reset the rhythm of your life. And from that reset, everything else begins to align, not because you changed the world, but because you changed yourself to meet the world in a new state of being. A healthy body does not guarantee success, but a fatigued body is certainly the beginning of failure. And when the mind is dominated by unresolved tension, it ceases to be a space for creativity, let alone a place to make vital decisions. That is why, when you begin each day with movement, intentional, connected, and conscious, you are practicing the greatest skill of all, mastering your internal state. That is something no book, no mentor, no opportunity can do for you. I know you live in a world that is constantly busy, rushed, and urging you to do more. But I am not inviting you to do more. I am inviting you to go deeper, not to add more tasks, but to add more meaning, not to cram in more effort, but to choose one thing every day that restores your peace and clarity. Think about this. If for just 30 days you consistently reconnect with your body, you won't just gain better health, you will rebuild the mental foundation your entire life has been calling for. And the most beautiful part is this: no one else can do it for you, but no one can stop you from starting, except yourself. If you are truly serious about transformation, don't search for miracles outside, return inward, to where every movement, every breath is waiting to be heard, like a silent call to awaken a new journey. It is from that very place that all great transformation begins. If I could offer only one piece of advice to anyone desperately seeking a turning point in life, I wouldn't talk about discipline or effort. I would talk about sleep. Perhaps you are expecting a bolder formula, a dramatic action to shift everything, but you'd be surprised by the quiet power a good night's sleep can bring to your mental, physical, and intellectual life. Because you see, sleep is not merely a time when the body rests. It is the moment when the mind heals, when the subconscious activates, and when the soul is renewed to walk the journey of life with greater steadiness. I used to make the same mistake, just like so many others out there, thinking that the later I stayed up, the longer I worked, the more I proved my determination. I believed that cutting back on sleep would help me chase my dreams faster, but all I got in return was fatigue, half-hearted decisions, and emotions so tangled that I no longer knew what truly mattered. It took me years to understand this. A tired mind cannot be clear, and a body that is not restored cannot possibly stay the course. People say a successful day begins in the morning. I agree, but I'd add this. A good morning always begins with a proper night of rest. And rest isn't just about lying in bed. It's a process of preparation, a ritual of self-love built by creating a sacred space for sleep, a place where you set aside pressure, pause the unfinished conversations in your mind, and allow your thoughts to loosen gently into peace. I often advise my students to establish a consistent sleep and wake time each day, like a steady rhythm their body can recognize and respond to. It's not about restriction. It's about treating your biological system with kindness, giving it the rhythm and stability it naturally needs to function at its best. And you'll witness something magical after just a few short days. You'll wake without an alarm. You'll feel light instead of struggling. You'll see the new day as a fresh beginning, filled with energy instead of a battle for survival. I know that in today's modern life, it's not easy to go to bed on time when messages keep buzzing, notifications keep lighting up, and social media becomes a trap that keeps us scrolling into the night without realizing it. But have you noticed? The more time you spend watching the world of others, the more you drain the time meant to regenerate your own being. The more you postpone sleep, the more you borrow tomorrow's energy to pay for today, and that is a very costly loan. Instead, create a no-tech zone before bed. Instead of scrolling through a screen, pick up a gentle book. Let a piece of calming music ease you into stillness, or simply sit in silence for a few minutes. Inhale peace, exhale the day's weight. You don't need elaborate rituals. You just need one simple habit, repeated each night so your body knows it is time to rest, to rebuild, and to prepare for a new day with full strength. And remember this, sleep is not laziness. Sleeping well, deeply, and consistently is a high form of discipline when you know how to prioritize what truly nourishes your being. Creative breakthroughs, life-changing decisions, and moments of profound clarity. None of them come from an exhausted brain. They come only when you allow yourself to be renewed each night in real and restorative sleep. You can do this. You don't need to change your entire life overnight. You just need to go to bed 1 hour earlier tonight. Just set the phone aside and open your heart to the quiet. It's a small action, but it is these small, repeated actions that build a life that is both sustainable and radiant from within. If you've ever wondered why some days feel so smooth, your mind clear, your energy full, your emotions balanced, the secret might very well lie in the night before. I've spent years observing how the human mind operates under different states, and what I've discovered is this: nothing impacts your performance and emotional state more profoundly than the quality of your sleep. It is the silent preparation that ultimately determines how you live, work, feel, and respond to life. In the pivotal moments of my life, when I had to make decisions that carried lasting consequences, I never relied on a mind that was simply awaked. I needed one that was renewed. And that doesn't come from a cup of coffee. It doesn't come from forcing myself to power through. It comes from a night of deep rest. That is when the brain restructures information, emotions are reorganized, and the subconscious has the chance to connect forgotten pieces. People call it recovery, but I prefer to call it the process of self-reconstruction. We often forget that in the modern world, where productivity is worshipped as the ultimate measure of success, rest is undervalued. We get swept up in the current of do more, achieve more, without asking ourselves if we are still clear-headed enough to do it with depth. So we stay up late, we sacrifice sleep, thinking we're moving forward. But ironically, the more you cut back on sleep, the more you hold yourself back from realizing your true potential. A sleep-deprived brain cannot think creatively. A weary heart cannot feel deeply. And a body in constant exhaustion cannot be a vessel for great goals. Want a productive day? Start with the night before. Don't treat sleep as the leftover of your day. See it as the first step into the next one. I often create a buffer zone before going to bed, shutting off devices, leaving unfinished conversations behind, and releasing thoughts of work. Instead, I let my mind flow like water gently drifting toward stillness. It's not about giving up. It's about consciously allowing your intellect to operate on a deeper level. I've met many leaders, entrepreneurs, and artists, people renowned for their quick thinking and far-reaching vision. When I asked them how they maintained high performance over long periods, many of them mentioned something deceptively simple. They guard their sleep as a non-negotiable part of their schedule. They understand that if they lose clarity, They lose their power to influence. And if they trade their inner strength for short-term gains, the cost won't just be their health. It will be long-term decline. Don't think you have to do more to prove yourself. Think instead about doing things right, with depth, with emotional and intellectual presence. And that only happens when you wake up each morning in a truly restored state. That feeling is hard to describe, but you'll know it when it arrives. You walk with more lightness. You approach problems with more compassion. And you know clearly what must be done, rather than simply reacting from habit. Sleep is not just a component of physical health. It is the gateway to mental resilience. When you sleep well, you're not just healthier, you're wiser, because you're giving yourself access to a wordless space where wounds are quietly healed, where ideas are crystallized from the depths of the subconscious, and where the ego is laid down to make space for inner stillness. So if you're trying to change your life in 30 days, don't focus only on what you need to do during the day. Now ask yourself one simple question. Tonight, will I truly allow myself to rest? Because the breakthrough you seek may not lie in tomorrow's meeting or in that unfinished plan on your desk, but may begin the very moment you turn off the lights and allow your mind to return to its most primal state, the state of silence and renewal. I used to believe that in order to take control of life, one had to master grand elements, strategy, time, finances, and even the people around us. But the deeper I ventured into the inner layers of human consciousness, the more I discovered a fascinating paradox. Sometimes, to truly master yourself, what you need is not external control, but an internal shift, simple, subtle, and nearly forgotten. That is the breath. You might think you breathe every day and that it's obvious, unworthy of your attention, but let me tell you this, if you've never truly become aware of your breath, then you've never fully touched the essence of inner freedom. Breath is the very first thing we possess when we are born and the last thing we release when we leave this world. Every emotion, every reaction, every situation leaves a trace in your breath. When you're anxious, your breath shortens. When you're angry, it becomes rapid. When you're sorrowful, your breath grows heavy. And when you're at peace, it becomes light and deep. So why do we ignore something so obvious? Because we're too busy to notice. We let our minds chase after things beyond our reach, while our very bodies are silently telling us, just stop for a moment and breathe, and everything will become clearer. I remember once standing before a crucial decision in my career. My mind felt like a whirlwind, every assumption, every fear, every pressure from dozens of directions collapsing all at once. But instead of charging into action in a panic, I paused, placed my hand on my abdomen, and began to inhale deeply, slowly, fully, then exhaled gently, as if releasing thousands of tangled threads within me. Just after a few minutes, something strange happened. Everything in my head became clearer. I no longer viewed the issue through the lens of anxiety, but from a place of stability. And ever since that moment, I've carried this lesson with me. When you master your breath, you master your emotions. And when you master your emotions, you master your life. You don't need to retreat to a mountaintop or enter a meditation retreat to practice this. You can do it right in the noise of the city, in your office, or even while riding public transportation. Just a few minutes. Inhale deeply through your nose. Hold gently at the top, then exhale slowly through your mouth. Repeat 3 to 5 times. Nothing elaborate, nothing complicated. You just need to be fully present in each breath. And the wonderful thing is, breath not only calms your mind, it restructures how you engage with life. It gives you the power to pause before reacting, the space to observe before acting, and the chance to reconnect with yourself whenever you find you've strayed from your center. I've spoken with many founders, artists, and politicians, people whose every day is a series of non-stop decisions. When I asked what they did in their most stressful moments, their answers weren't fancy. They breathed. One person told me, I may lose control of the situation, but I never let go of my control over breath. It is in that simplicity that we find true inner strength. Not the kind to fight against the world, but the kind that lets you stay grounded when the world around you shakes. And if you still doubt it, let me invite you to try something simple. Tonight, before falling asleep, turn off all your devices, sit quietly in the dark, and spend just 3 minutes inhaling deeply and exhaling steadily. Do nothing else. Don't try to think about anything. Just let your mind follow each breath. You'll discover that within that stillness, something is healing. Something is being released. You don't need advice from the outside. What you need is a return inward. And the gateway back is your breath. There is one thing I firmly believe after many years of studying and teaching the psychology of success. Those who can control their breath are not easily controlled by the world. We often think of inner strength as something grand, resilience, courage, the will to overcome suffering. But sometimes that strength arises from something soft, gentle, seemingly fragile, yet it becomes the most solid foundation in life's most turbulent moments. The ability to maintain deep, steady breaths, even as you stand in the storm. I have witnessed many talented individuals crumble, not because they lack knowledge or grit, but because they lost control of their emotions at decisive moments. And do you know what often triggers those emotional surges? Not the circumstances, not someone else's words, but the unconscious reactions sparked by tension inside the body. A racing heartbeat, a gasping breath, a lack of oxygen to the brain, all of it stemming from one small thing you've overlooked. You forgot how to breathe properly. Breathing is not just a way to stay alive. It is a tool to create space between you and your impulses. In tense moments, if you don't react immediately but simply pause for 3 seconds, inhale slowly and exhale fully, you've just given yourself a pause to recalibrate your emotions. That pause is a sacred space where reason has the chance to speak, where the mind is invited in before action takes place. This is not weakness or hesitation. It is mastery at the highest level, a state of awareness that only those who train consistently can access. I call this the wisdom of the breath. When you train yourself to breathe consciously, you are no longer pulled along by emotional currents. You no longer say things you'll regret. You no longer make decisions rooted in fear. You no longer get swept into reactive games that others want you to play. Instead, you stand firm, quiet, yet fully empowered. Breath is also the fastest recovery tool you have. Just a few minutes of proper deep breathing can supply your brain with more oxygen, slow your heart rate, and shift your nervous system from stress mode to restoration mode. No pill can do that as quickly and naturally. Yet, strangely, we don't use it. We might spend hours trying to figure out how to solve a problem, but we can't spare 5 minutes to become clearer before we even begin to think. I remember one particularly important speech where I had to speak in front of thousands. Just before walking onto the stage, my heart was racing, my hands slightly cold, and my mind began to play out the worst-case scenarios. But instead of letting anxiety take over, I closed my eyes, stood still backstage, and began to breathe. Every inhale was a reminder, I am here. Every exhale, a release. I am capable. Within just a few minutes, everything shifted. I stepped onto that stage not as someone trying to prove something, but as someone bringing a wave of inspiring energy. That is the kind of power you can train for every day. And you'll see it show up exactly when you need it most. Breathing correctly isn't just about staying calm. It is how you maintain presence in everything you do. When you eat and breathe consciously, you're not just full, you feel grateful. When you work with rhythmic breathing, you don't just complete tasks, you're fully present in the process. When you walk and sync your breath with each step, you're not just moving, you're meditating through everyday life. And the final thing I want you to remember, breath is the bridge between body and mind, between instinct and reason, between the person you are and the person you can become. Every day, you have the right to step onto that bridge. Every day you can return to yourself simply through a single deep breath. You don't have to wait until life becomes too heavy to seek peace. You can begin right now. Inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and start again from within. There is one asset that once lost leaves a person incapable of mastering any other aspect of life, and that is focus. We often believe that time is our most precious resource, but in truth, it is attention that determines how far you can go with each passing minute. And the sad reality is this: in this dazzling age of technology and hyperconnectivity, the thing most quietly stolen from us is exactly that: our focus. Have you ever noticed how a single notification from your phone can pull you into a spiral of distraction for hours on end? How can one seemingly harmless scroll on a screen rob you of an entire morning without your awareness? Today's thieves of attention don't come with noise. They come disguised as convenience, sweet, easy, and irresistibly seductive. I am not against technology. On the contrary, I am grateful for it. But I also understand this truth: if you do not know how to use technology, it will end up using you. And the frightening part is that most of us have already let that happen without even realizing it. We trade presents for short videos. We forfeit real connection for hours comparing our lives to the perfectly curated images of others. Our minds, once meant for deep thought and powerful ideas, are now cluttered with scattered information and fragmented emotions. I once posed a question to a group of students: in the last 24 hours, how many minutes have you truly spent just with yourself? Not on social media, not responding to notifications, not engaging with others, just sitting still, listening to your own mind and emotions. Their answers stunned me. Most couldn't remember. One admitted, "I'm always busy, but I don't know why I feel so empty." That one sentence reflected a dangerous truth. We are living in a world full of noise, yet starving for depth. And if you truly want to transform your life in 30 days, start by resetting the relationship between you and the digital space. You don't need to switch off your phone. You don't need to delete your apps. All you need is to consciously define boundaries. Just as you wouldn't let a stranger walk into your house uninvited, you shouldn't allow any platform to enter your mind whenever it pleases. Set aside a portion of each day to unplug your mind from the outside world. Turn off notifications, leave your phone in another room, and return to the reality you're living in. I call this the mental quiet zone, a space you create for your mind to rest, for your attention to return, and for you to reclaim ownership of your own thoughts. In that space, you might write, read, take a walk, or simply sit in silence. No goals, no achievements, just presence. And you'll begin to notice something magical. Thoughts that once felt jumbled start to gain clarity. Ideas you thought were lost resurface, and a deep stream of energy begins to flow. The energy of awareness. It is in retreating from the noise of the world that you finally hear your true voice. It is in the moment you disconnect from the world that you reconnect with yourself. I'm not saying you have to give up social media or technology. I'm simply inviting you to ask this question: am I using the tool, or is the tool using me? If you want to build a strong future, you cannot allow your mind to be drained daily by things that do not nourish your vision. Start with one small step. Set a daily limit on social media use. You don't need to be extreme, just be intentional. And every minute you reclaim from distraction is a minute returned to your dream. It is time to read a page, write a journal entry, bring an idea to life, or simply to be present with yourself. Life does not live inside a screen. It's happening right in front of you, in your breath, in your emotions, in your actions and daily choices. And only when you are focused can you truly live, rather than merely scroll through your own existence. If you've ever felt exhausted, even without doing anything physically demanding, ever lost interest in something you once loved, ever wanted to give up even though your plans are still intact, then perhaps the problem doesn't lie in your capabilities, but elsewhere. You are leaking mental energy into trivial things. In an era where information pours down like a flood, what gets depleted most is not time, but presence. We don't feel drained because we do too much, but because we're pulled in too many directions. Every piece of excess information you consume, every time you react out of habit, every time you allow someone into your mental space without discernment, all of it quietly drains you without your awareness. I've seen many people with great potential who could never reach their peak for one simple reason. They didn't know how to hold on to themselves. They let the outside world dictate their emotions, control their schedules, and worst of all, silence their inner voice. And you know what's most heartbreaking? They don't even realize it's happening. Day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, they think they're still in charge, still in control, when in truth, they've lost the ability to focus on the most important thing, themselves. So how do you protect your mental energy in a world out of order? How do you keep your mind from being fragmented by meaningless things? The answer, like all profound truths, doesn't come from anything complicated. It comes from choosing a different way to live, starting with very small things, what you allow into your mind, how you respond to the world, and whether you give yourself even a few minutes each day to return to the deep stillness within. I personally spend at least 15 minutes each morning without turning on any device, without speaking, without starting work. I simply sit alone with a warm cup of tea, a blank page, and let everything drift through my mind like passing clouds. Sometimes I write down what's been weighing on me. Sometimes I do nothing. But in that silence, I reset myself. I reclaim my attention. I remember who I am, where I'm going, and what truly matters. That's the moment I protect my mental energy before the world even gets the chance to invade it. And I hope you do the same. You can't stop the world from being noisy, but you can choose not to let that noise enter you. Each day, create an inviolable zone in your schedule, a time not for anyone else, not for work, not for social media, not for anything but you and your own mind. Even just 15 minutes can be the gateway that brings you back to yourself. When you live constantly in reaction, you slowly lose your identity. But when you know how to pause, how to observe before acting, you reclaim your position as the commander of your own life. I'm not telling you to live in isolation or to reject the modern world. I'm simply saying this. If you want to stand firm amid all pressure, you need to train the ability to remain anchored within, no matter what's happening outside. And this doesn't come from brute strength, degrees, or social status. It comes from the quiet decisions you make, repeated every single day. Choosing not to react immediately, choosing not to read meaningless news, choosing to turn off your device instead of checking it one more time. Those small choices are the highest expressions of inner discipline. Imagine your mind as a room. Every time you let in a random notification, it's like letting a stranger walk freely through that space. Every time you scroll past hundreds of meaningless pieces of content, you're throwing garbage into your own living space. So if you truly value yourself, why not clean it? Why not guard that space as sacred? Take the time to reset that mental environment, not to escape the world, but to be strong enough to face it head on. Because focus doesn't just make you work efficiently, it allows you to live deeply. And only when you live deeply will you have the strength to withstand the erosion of this fast-moving world. You will no longer feel like life is slipping by meaninglessly, no longer repeat the cycle of busy but empty. Instead, you'll begin to live with intention, act with heart, and walk with clarity. And that is when you are truly alive. In a world increasingly thrown into chaos by a rushed pace of life, the pressure to succeed, and the constant collision of information against our minds, there is one thing that seems too simple, yet serves as the foundation of every deep transformation: the ability to be present. I once believed that success was a blend of solid planning, relentless action, and unwavering discipline. But the more closely I observed those who were truly living in alignment with themselves, the more I realized you can do everything right, but if your mind is not anchored in the present moment, you are still living like a shadow of yourself. Mindfulness is not some exotic technique or fleeting trend. It is a way of living that I believe anyone who wishes to build a resilient life from within must practice, because none of us can control the future, nor can we rewrite the past. But we always have the power to choose to live deeply in each present moment. And it is precisely this complete presence that becomes the starting point of all true power. You might be sitting in a meeting, yet your mind is drifting toward unanswered emails, unfinished tasks, or mistakes you made yesterday. You might be with a loved one, yet your heart is anxiously worrying about something that hasn't even happened. You are alive, but not truly living. And this absence, this departure from the present, is the hidden cause behind your exhaustion, lack of energy, and joyless existence that you can't quite explain. I've practiced presence in the most ordinary moments of life. When washing my hands, I feel the water running over my skin. When eating, I set my phone aside and focus on the flavors before me. When walking, I listen to the sound of my footsteps on the ground and pay attention to each breath flowing in and out naturally. These seemingly small things are how you bring yourself back to yourself. You don't need a special setting. You don't need hours of meditation. You just need to return to the exact place where you are and be fully there. Mindfulness doesn't require you to change your entire life. It simply invites you to pause, to observe, and to live more consciously. When you drop a spoon and instead of getting angry, you smile and quietly pick it up, that is mindfulness. When you walk into a meeting room and instead of reacting on impulse, you pause for a breath before speaking, that is mindfulness. These actions are so small that no one notices, but their power lies in their accumulation. Every time you choose presence, you are restoring the mental energy that was once drained by distraction. I often tell my students, if you are not present in the small things, don't expect to create something big, because all greatness begins with steadiness in the simplest of details. And you will be amazed to discover that when you are truly present with each action, everything becomes clearer. You no longer have to struggle to think, what should I do next? Because presence will guide you. You no longer have to control other people's emotions, because presence gives you the inner strength to remain unaffected by them. And you no longer have to search far and wide for peace, because it already exists, right where you pause and breathe with your whole being. Mindfulness is the space between reaction and choice. It is the space you create so that you don't live by reflex, but by intention. In today's world where everyone is running, the act of stopping becomes an act of courage, and the one who knows how to be present is the one who is truly alive, not according to the world's tempo, but to the rhythm of their own heart. When I first integrated mindfulness, the practice of presence, into my life, what amazed me wasn't that the world outside changed, but that the way I approached that world transformed entirely. From someone easily agitated by delays, anxious when results didn't come, and often lost in the whirlwind of information, I became someone who knew how to pause, not to avoid, but to observe, not to wait, but to choose my response from a more grounded place. And I believe that if you can learn to be present amidst the noise, you will not only master your emotions, but also unlock a powerful, invisible force, an energy of renewal that rises from within. You see, we are constantly surrounded by stress, from work pressure and social expectations to worries about the future and regrets from the past. All of it consumes our mental energy. But what few people realize is this: most fatigue doesn't come from work, but from a mind that never stops wondering. When you eat, but your mind is fixated on a deadline. When you're in a meeting, but scrolling through your phone. When you're speaking with someone, but already planning your next task in your head. It's this fragmentation that silently depletes your inner reserves. In contrast, each time you choose to pause and focus on a single task, you give yourself the chance to restore. And mindfulness is the bridge that leads you from dispersion to wholehearted engagement. I often advise those overwhelmed by life to start with the smallest possible step: return to the breath. You don't need hours of meditation, nor do you need to retreat from the world. All you need is 5 minutes in the middle of your busy day to breathe deeply, acknowledge the emotions present within, and accept them gently. That alone is the first act of self-compassion. And from that compassion, you'll begin to rediscover something precious that fast-paced living often erases, the feeling of being truly alive, slowly but meaningfully. In high-pressure environments such as business, politics, or the arts, I've witnessed even the most disciplined and capable individuals fall into exhaustion, not because they lacked talent, but because they were no longer present with themselves. When you live in a state of always having to, always needing to, always rushing, you are sacrificing long-term clarity for short-term outcomes. And a mind lacking presence can no longer create, no longer feel, and no longer regenerate itself. That's why practicing mindfulness isn't a luxury. It's a wise and necessary decision to preserve your decision-making power, emotional stability, and resilience in the face of adversity. I remember a long work trip where the schedule was so tight that there was no time to rest. But just 10 minutes between meetings, stepping outside, finding a quiet corner, standing tall, breathing slowly, and bringing all of my attention back to my body was enough to recharge me. I returned to the meeting table not only clear-headed, but with an open heart, unaffected by the tension around me. You can do the same. And once this becomes a habit, you'll no longer depend on external conditions to maintain your energy. You will create a safe space within yourself, a sanctuary where no one can hurt you, where you are free to recover, and where you can begin again at any moment. Presence, when practiced consistently, becomes a soft inner strength that infuses every action. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to rush. You don't need to fight for recognition. Because when you are truly present, you don't just connect to yourself, you connect more deeply with others. A glance, a word, a simple gesture carries 10 times the meaning because it comes from a quiet, unforced mind. Think about it. If each day you dedicate just 10 minutes to genuine presence, that adds up to 300 minutes a month, 5 hours of deep living. And if you sustain this for a year, you'll have 60 hours, 2.5 full days lived with a fully awake mind, 2.5 days without chasing, without comparison, without judgment, without being pulled in every direction. Just you, whole, steady, and complete. That is the most solid foundation from which to build a truly meaningful life. When someone asks me what can change a person's life without money, status, or luck, I do not hesitate to answer: the right book at the right time. In my more than 20 years of studying success, I discovered an astonishing common thread among great individuals. They are all readers. They do not read to escape reality nor to boast knowledge, but to understand themselves, to understand others, and to see life through lenses they had never looked through before. Because each book is a door that leads you into someone else's world, and also a mirror that reflects the inner world you're living in. When I was a young man without many opportunities to interact with successful people, I met them through books. I didn't need to step into luxurious conferences to hear advice, nor did I need powerful connections to learn from the masters. All I needed was a quiet corner, an open book, and a soul willing to receive. It was through every page that I began to ask myself, who am I? Who could I become? And what is limiting me? These are questions no one can answer for you, but books can help you dig deep into yourself to discover the answers. Reading is not just the act of collecting information, it is a disciplined habit to unlock the mind. The more you read, the more clearly you'll see the cognitive barriers that have held you captive without your knowing. A great book doesn't simply tell you what's right, it forces you to think. And through that thinking process, you begin to restructure your belief system, shed old biases, and build a new map for your personal growth journey. I often compare reading to watering the soul. If you let the soil of your mind dry out for too long, nothing can grow. But just a trickle of water each day, little by little, and your mind will begin to flourish. An idea, a passage, a sudden question from a book can become the seed that sparks profound change in how you act, how you choose, even how you face pain. Because books do more than give you knowledge. They give you tools to understand yourself in the midst of chaos. Once I met a man who had failed in business and lost everything. When asked what helped him rise again from that dark time, he didn't mention new investments or golden opportunities. He simply held up an old, worn-out book, its spine broken and pages full of notes. Every time I was about to give up, he said, I reread that chapter and remembered I was still worthy of one more try. That power didn't come from the words themselves, but from the resonance between what he was going through and the wisdom the book awakened in him. You don't need to read dozens of books every month to become excellent. You just need to consistently set aside time each day for reading, whether it's 15 minutes before bed or a few pages while waiting for the bus. Your mind is being trained to grow sharper. And more importantly, you are building perseverance, focus, and a habit of nurturing yourself with what is most refined. Choose books the way you choose a guide. Don't just read for entertainment. Read to elevate your awareness. Seek out books that make you pause midway to reflect. Read works that make you want to live differently after closing the final page, because those aren't just books. They are the starting point for a new. Reading a book has never been the destination. It is the beginning. No matter how great a book may be, if it remains only in your memory and never translates into action, it is no different from a map that has never been opened. The true value of a book does not lie in the number of pages you flip, but in the number of actions you dare to change after reading. And that is why I always tell my students, read to live differently, not just to know more. Knowledge only becomes power when it is brought into real life, tested by action, proven through results, and refined by experience. When you read a passage about perseverance, what matters is not that you nod in agreement, but whether the next day you have the courage to persist 10 minutes longer when things get tough. When you read a chapter about gratitude, what counts is not that you feel touched, but whether you can look at your loved one with gentler eyes and let go of a reproach you've long carried inside. Because if a book only stirs your emotions, it will fade like smoke. But if it sparks in you a new behavior, a new choice, no matter how small, then you are truly transforming yourself from the roots. And to do that, you need to learn how to choose the right book at the right time, for the right version of yourself. Not every famous book is right for you. Not every page needs to be read to the end. At each stage of your life, your mind will require a different kind of nourishment. Sometimes you need awakening. Seek books that are energizing and action-driven. Other times you need calm. Look for works that are deep and contemplative. Sometimes you need practical strategies. Read clear, simple guides that you can apply right away. And sometimes you just need a book like a friend, not to teach you anything, but simply to remind you that you are not alone. There was a time I spent an entire year reading only 3 books over and over. Not because I lacked choices, but because I wanted to understand deeply rather than broadly. Each time I returned to them, I discovered something I had missed before, because I too had changed. Each reading was a different experience. When you read with the intention to live it, not just consume it, you begin to rewrite your life, step by step, action by action, decision by decision. Another beautiful thing about turning reading into a lifestyle is that you'll never feel lost again on your personal growth journey, because books will remind you that others have gone before you, others who stumbled, hurt, and lost their way just like you, but they overcame it, and so can you. Those whispers from the pages will lift you in your weakest moments, and when you act from that lift, you are not only growing, you are passing the light on to others through the way you live. So, don't just read to know, read to awaken, read to act, read to transform, day by day. Because every page you live fully could become a new chapter in the greatest book of all, your own life. We live in an era where everyone is busy, but very few truly feel fulfilled. They run from one goal to the next, stacking achievement upon achievement. Yet over time, a certain emptiness, depletion, or even profound weariness begins to show in their eyes, because when people place all their focus on material success while neglecting their inner life, for what they may earn is the admiration of the world, but at the cost of losing themselves. I used to believe that to become great, one had to sacrifice everything. But after years of observation, reflection, and walking that very path, I came to understand a different truth. Achievements have no real value if the price you pay is your peace, your health, or your most sincere relationships. Balance is not about mechanically splitting your time between work and personal life. Balance is knowing what you're living for in each moment. You can work 12 hours a day and still feel fulfilled if you know you're creating something meaningful. Conversely, you might only work 4 hours and still feel utterly drained. If you're constantly living to prove yourself, to surpass others, or to achieve something just to feel accepted, balance, in essence, begins from within, from choosing to live consciously rather than merely reacting to the relentless current outside. I once had a conversation with a successful man, someone who had everything society admires, a large company, immense wealth, and constant media recognition. But as we sat down, he looked at me with quiet eyes and said, "I've become so successful that no one can compete with me anymore. Yet I no longer know how to talk to my daughter." That sentence struck like a blade into my understanding of success. That's why I always emphasize to those pursuing great careers, never let the most important things become the first things you forget. Balance does not come from doing less, but from doing everything with full presence. When you're having dinner with your family, be truly there. Don't scroll your phone. Don't think about tomorrow's report. When you're working, give your full heart to each detail. Don't get distracted by unresolved personal matters. It is this wholeheartedness that gives rise to a sense of completeness. And that completeness is what nourishes your deepest mental energy. Because when you are present, you are no longer torn between roles. You don't live with guilt for working and neglecting family, or for resting while your work remains unfinished. You know you're doing the right thing at the right moment with a whole heart. There is a great misconception many people fall into, that only once they succeed are they allowed to enjoy life. But I want you to understand this. How you live today determines the quality of your success tomorrow. If you sacrifice your health, your joy, and your relationships in the present just to earn the promise of happiness someday, then you may be placing the wrong bet. Happiness doesn't automatically appear when you reach a certain income level. It's something you build every day, in small choices, in the subtle balance between effort and rest, between contribution and self-preservation. A formula I often share is this: set balance anchors throughout your day. It might be a quiet morning with a few pages of reading, a screen-free dinner, 10 minutes of meditation during work, or a casual conversation with a loved one. These small anchors keep you from being swept away by the current of performance. And more importantly, they remind you that you are a human being, not a machine that only produces results. Finally, I want to leave you with this. Don't wait until your body cries out, your mind breaks down, or your relationships fall apart to seek balance. Begin today by asking yourself, what truly matters to me? And then adjust your schedule, your lifestyle, your decisions, so that what truly matters is always protected. Because if you can keep your inner fire warm, even while running the race of achievements, then you are not just successful, you are living in alignment with the highest mission of your life. When people talk about balance, most imagine it as a rational distribution of time between work and rest. But if you truly want to live a life that is both successful and profound, you must understand this. Time management is not merely about counting minutes. It's about the art of choosing what deserves to exist in each of those minutes. Time is not scarce. What's scarce is clarity in your priorities. And when you fail to determine what matters most in each season of your life, your time will leak away into urgent but unimportant tasks, meaningless conversations, unconscious phone checks, reluctantly accepted meetings, and then you'll wonder, Why do I always feel like I have no time for myself? After years of mentoring hundreds of young people and ambitious entrepreneurs, I've realized one undeniable truth. The most accomplished people are not those who do the most, but those who choose the right things to do and do them with full presence. They don't let their schedule define their values. They let their values define their schedule. They don't start their day by checking emails, but by spending a quiet moment asking, what is truly worthy of my time today? And then they let their day unfold with clarity, not chaos. I once adopted a simple but profound principle, dividing my time into 3 layers of meaning. The first layer is time for creating value. When you work, develop skills, and build achievements. The second is time for connection, moments shared with loved ones, friends, and your own self. And the third, which seems unimportant but is actually the foundation for the other 2, is time for inner renewal, the stillness you reserve for reading, meditation, walking, journaling, or simply sitting quietly in the late afternoon sun, doing absolutely nothing. Without the third layer, the first becomes hollow and the second fragile. A depleted soul cannot create sustainable value, nor can it offer true connection. Try to reflect on your own day. How much time are you truly investing in what nourishes your long-term life? How much of it are you spending on things you feel you must do instead of those you choose? How many minutes go into clarifying your path, and how many hours into chasing what others expect of you? Until you arrange your time with depth, you'll keep drowning, no matter how many hours there are in a day. But once you learn to protect sacred blocks of time for yourself, everything starts to change. Not because you suddenly have more time, but because you begin to live as if time is the most sacred thing. A small habit I've practiced for years is this: blocking personal time on my calendar before scheduling any work. It could be 30 minutes in the morning for exercise, 1 hour in the evening for reading, or a quiet weekend afternoon spent alone. These blank time slots, when treated as serious priorities, will not be hijacked by last-minute meetings or unforeseen obligations. They are a silent pledge to yourself. I deserve to be present in my own life. What I want you to truly understand is this: balance is not about perfect proportions. It's about the internal state you feel when you look back on a day and know you lived it aligned with your truth. There will be days when you work 12 hours and feel exhilarated. There will be days when you only work 3 hours and spend the rest recharging. That's okay. As long as you know you chose that and weren't swept along because you were afraid to stop. True balance is when you work with all your heart and still don't lose yourself, when you rest without guilt, when you succeed and still preserve peace in your soul. That's what we're aiming for. And always remember this: time never comes back, but if you use it to build a life of balance, depth, and intention, then you won't just have a fulfilling day, you'll be crafting a fulfilling life. And that right there is the true success I want you to reach. Throughout my life, I have met countless talented, dedicated people, those who work tirelessly without ever backing down, only to collapse right on the path they were building. Not because they lacked willpower, not because they were incompetent. On the contrary, they were perfectionists, hardworking, and deeply driven to create something meaningful. But precisely because they were holding on to too many things at once, they no longer had the strength to hold on to what mattered most: peace of mind. That was when I realized going far isn't about pushing harder, but about knowing when to let go. There's a common misconception in modern society that to prove your worth, you must control everything. Control your work, control others, control results, control emotions. But the more you try to hold everything tightly, the more exhausted you become. Because the truth is, the more you control, the more you lose freedom. The more you cling to everything, the more you drain your own life force. Strength does not lie in carrying every burden alone. True strength is having the courage to trust and empower others, to take a step back so someone else can step forward. It is realizing that You don't have to do everything to create real value. I once went through a phase where every task in the organization had to go through me to be executed. I believed that only if I did it myself would things be done right, done fast, and done well. But I soon realized no one on the team was truly developing. They didn't feel trusted. They weren't taking initiative. Day by day, they became more passive. This not only wore me out, stifled the creative spirit of the very people I wanted to empower. It was in that moment that I had to face a difficult truth. My perfectionism was hindering others from growing and, in turn, suffocating the very system I had built with so much passion. I learned to let go. Little by little, it started with allowing others to make mistakes, allowing myself not to be present at every meeting, allowing decisions to be made without my involvement, and something remarkable happened. Not only did the system not collapse, it ran more smoothly, more independently, more creatively, because when you trust others, you're not just handing over responsibility, you're giving them the belief that they are capable of creating something valuable. I want you to picture someone clenching a handful of sand. The tighter the grip, the more the sand slips through their fingers. But if they open their hand gently, holding it with ease and trust, they retain more without losing themselves in the process. Life is the same. Some things are not meant to be yours forever. Some roles are only meant to accompany you for a season, and some pressures, if you have the courage to release them, won't weaken you, but instead help you regenerate your energy, clarity, and trust in life's natural flow. I once taught a simple principle: if someone can do something 80% as well as you, let them do it. They will learn and grow, and you will have more time to focus on what only you can do: strategic thinking, deep connection, inspiration, and shaping the future. Don't make yourself the bottleneck of your own organization, and don't turn your personal life into a string of weary days because you're trying to carry everything. Learn to trust, to delegate, and to stand tall, even when you're not in control of it all. The most important lesson I've learned on this journey is this: letting go is not abandoning responsibility. It's transforming how you carry it, from control to empowerment, from overexertion to clear direction, from personal burden to collective strength. When you empower others the right way, you're teaching them how to lead their own lives. And when you're no longer afraid to let go, you'll feel a new surge of inner strength rising, a power that comes not from holding tight, but from standing firm without needing to grip, from wisdom that needs no control. Now, this is the thing. One of the greatest challenges on the journey to success does not lie in skill or knowledge, but in the ability to remain grounded under constant pressure. When you walk a different path, when you pursue goals beyond your comfort zone, when you lead a team or take full ownership of your life, stress becomes inevitable. But what I want you to deeply understand is this: pressure doesn't destroy you. It is how you face it that determines your outcome. And to live long, work sustainably, and give your all without burning out, you need one essential skill: the art of conscious release from within. I have witnessed many extraordinarily capable individuals collapse, not because of failure, but because they had become too accustomed to suppressing emotions, hiding their fatigue, and gritting their teeth through every challenge, never daring to admit they were depleted. They mistook strength for the absence of weakness, and resilience for the ability to endure without pause. But true strength is knowing when to stop and recharge. It's having the courage to face the wounds silently building up, and having enough compassion to heal yourself before continuing the journey. I want you to take a moment and look within. Have there been days when you achieved spectacular success, only to come home feeling emotionally hollow? Have there been moments when you reached your goals, received praise, and yet could not sleep soundly at night? These are signs that pressure has been accumulating for too long without a healthy outlet, and if not recognized in time, it will slowly erode your creativity, passion, and your ability to truly connect with those around you. I used to believe that rest was a luxury, or worse, a sign of laziness. But the deeper I ventured into personal development, the more I realized proper rest is a mark of maturity. a long-term strategy of the wise. You cannot lead anyone if your soul is worn thin. You cannot make sound decisions if your mind is clouded by anxiety and inner conflict. And you cannot inspire others if you no longer feel inspired by your own life. So, learn to release, intentionally, mindfully, and with self-love. There are many ways to do this. For me, sometimes it's simply a morning where I do nothing but walk slowly, listen to the wind brushing through the trees, and feel the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Sometimes it's a few gentle pages of a book before sleep. Sometimes it's a heartfelt conversation with a loved one, not seeking advice, just presence. And at times I choose to sit down and write, not to find answers, but to give what's inside me a voice. That act of expression becomes the release valve for burdens that once felt impossible to untangle. One habit I consistently maintain, especially during high-stress periods, is setting moments to check inner strength throughout my day. In those moments, I pause everything, place my hand over my chest, take a deep breath, and ask myself, is my mind at peace? Is my body at ease? Is my next action coming from emotion or from clarity? The honest answers in those few seconds help me recalibrate my pace, preventing me from slipping into a cycle of tired reactions. And what I most want to share with you is this. You don't have to wait until you collapse to begin nurturing your inner strength. Do it while you're still standing tall. Proactively carve out space to breathe, to feel, to renew. Because like a bowstring that is always pulled tight, if never released, it will eventually snap. Humans are no different. You need to know when to stretch yourself and when to retreat in order to refill your mind. That's not weakness. It is the essential wisdom of those who understand the value of sustainability. Remember, the goal of life is not just to achieve more, but to stay conscious enough to enjoy every step of the journey. You have nothing to prove to anyone. In truth, the steadier you remain in the storm, the more powerfully you inspire. Quietly, but with a resonance that runs deep. And when you learn how to protect your inner strength, it's not only your career that grows. Your very being will become radiant, resilient, and unexpectedly trustworthy. No matter how busy I am, no matter what comes up, that 1 hour is non-negotiable. And that completely changed how I viewed discipline. Discipline is not about rigidity. It's not about force. Discipline is the promise you keep to yourself, no matter how chaotic the world around you becomes. It is the deepest expression of self-love. The problem is, in a world that glorifies busyness and sensational leaps, small steps are often dismissed. You read a book for 15 minutes each morning, no one praises you. You pause for 5 minutes of deep breathing in the middle of work. No one notices. You journal at night. Someone might say you're wasting your time, but what they don't know is these small behaviors repeated with consistency are rewiring your entire nervous system, reshaping your thinking, and transforming your emotional state. You are quietly changing, not loudly, but profoundly. And one day you'll look at yourself and realize, I'm not the same person anymore, not because of a miracle, but because I stayed committed to the smallest things. I want you to imagine building a house. You can't place it on an unstable foundation, no matter how expensive the bricks are. In the same way, you can't expect your life to flourish without a core system of habits to support your inner strength. You need to create repeated daily actions, not because someone forces you to, but because you understand. That's how you prepare for the future you long for. Every glass of water you drink on time is a gesture of respect for your body. Every short lesson you write down is a brick for your wisdom. Every time you choose to turn away from social media to listen to yourself, you are choosing to return to truth. I often tell my students, you don't need long strides. You just need not to stop. Habits are not built from inspiration, but from perseverance, even when inspiration fades. On the days you're tired, you continue. On days of rain or when your mind feels chaotic, you still do what you committed to. It is in those imperfect days that you build the strongest version of yourself. And that persistence is what makes you irreplaceable. not because you're better than others, but because you are trustworthy with yourself. Once you've begun with a small action, the next question is no longer how do I start, but rather how do I sustain it? Because so many people have changed for a few days, a few weeks, even a few months, only to slide back into stagnation simply because they lacked one thing: a strong enough support system to hold them steady when inspiration fades. I, Napoleon Hill, have always believed that aspiration is the spark, but habits are the fuel. You can dream with burning desire, but without building an intentional system of behavior, that desire will flare up once and then fade away. An effective habit system doesn't need to be complicated. It requires three core elements: simplicity, clarity, and consistency. Start by identifying the smallest behaviors that have the potential to trigger the greatest positive ripple effects. These are foundational actions, like waking up on time, drinking water right after getting up, writing one sentence of gratitude each day, meditating for 5 minutes before starting work. Don't underestimate things that seem too ordinary. It's the repetition of these things day after day that will reprogram your mind in a new direction. More self-aware, more alert, and more resolute. The key lies not in how much you do, but how many times you do it without breaking your word to yourself. If every day you maintain a habit, even just for 5 minutes, you are sending a very clear message to your brain: I am someone who keeps promises. And when you believe you are someone who keeps their word, every next action will be built upon a foundation of inner strength, a belief that you are capable of seeing things through. That's not arrogance. That's self-mastery. The most precious asset a person can possess in this distracted world. To truly root your habits, you need to design your environment and living space to support them. I often advise young students of mine, if you want to read each night, place your book right at your bedside, not on the highest shelf. If you want to exercise in the morning, lay out your clothes and shoes the night before. Habits don't thrive on willpower alone. They thrive in environments that support you so that you don't have to fight every day. The fewer the barriers, the easier the habit sticks. The fewer decisions you need to make, the easier it is to stay consistent. Because in this modern life where distractions are always lurking, what you need is not a fleeting burst of motivation, but a wise system that protects your long-term persistence. One simple yet powerful strategy I often apply is to track progress daily by marking the presence of the habit. Each day you complete it, put a check mark on your calendar. When you see a long chain of consecutive days marked, you won't want to break that chain. That sense of I did it will strengthen your self-respect. And over time, you'll no longer do it out of obligation. You'll do it because it has become part of who you are. Your habit system is no longer something you strive to maintain. It becomes your action identity each day. However, there will be days when you miss. And what I want you to remember deeply is this: missing once does not mean failure, but giving up after a single miss is what sends you back to the starting line. When that happens, forgive yourself, but don't give up on yourself. Come back the next day. Pick up the rhythm as if you never stumbled. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to not stop. That return, that comeback, is what truly forges lasting inner strength. Finally, I want you to see your habit system as a living cycle that nourishes every aspect of your life. A good habit brings positive emotion. Positive emotion elevates performance. High performance produces results. Results reinforce belief, and belief becomes the fuel that drives you to persist with the next habit. That's the upward cycle that carries you forward without burning you out, helping you transform your original aspiration into a grounded, resilient reality. This is also the point at which happiness no longer comes from the outside, but rises from the inner sense that you're living in alignment with what you believe in. You no longer need to shout to be recognized. You don't even need results to validate your worth, because consistency has become the clearest expression of the trust and inner depth you quietly preserve each day. But I don't deny that even when you've reached this stage, there will still be hard days. There will still be times when you want to quit, to rest, to return to the old comfort zone. And that is exactly when you need a deeper vision to hold yourself steady. That vision no longer lies in goals, it lies in the reason. Ask yourself, why did I start? How will my life be different if I continue? What will happen if I give up? These questions, when answered with honesty and mindfulness, will pull you back onto the track without anyone having to remind you. I once wrote, "Discipline is power, and the greatest power is the ability to sustain right action even when no one is watching." But beyond that, I believe true strength is when you no longer need discipline to sustain what's right because it has become your nature. That's when you no longer have to try to live well, you simply are living well. You don't need to force yourself to stay present because presence has become your default state. You don't need to search for inspiration to act because it is through action that you find your inspiration. And if there's one thing I want to leave with you at this point in your journey, it's this. Keep going. No matter what tomorrow brings, no matter what anyone says, no matter how slow the results may come, just keep going. Because every small step you take today is not just a repeated behavior. It is a quiet declaration to the world that says, I am not someone who gives up on myself easily. In the end, you will come to realize all the habits you've built, all the silent efforts you've made were never just about working more efficiently, living healthier, or becoming more successful. Those things, of course, matter, but beneath them lies something far deeper. You're gradually turning each day of your life into a powerful declaration that you refuse to live a blurry life, that you will not let your years pass by unnoticed, and that you won't let the world pull you into the current of superficiality. Because once you've chosen to live mindfully, once you've stepped onto the path of inner growth and discipline, you no longer accept the old excuses, the half-hearted lifestyles, the recurring negative emotions. You begin to protect the peace within your mind as something sacred. You learn when to retreat, when to move forward, and most importantly, you stop seeking validation from the outside because you have become the most trustworthy source of motivation in your own life. I want you to understand that no one is born programmed for success. Success is not a natural born talent. It is the result of choices you repeat every day between what's easy and what's right, between procrastination and action, between confusion and clarity. And that choice is rarely something grand at the start. It's just you telling yourself, today I will do the right thing, not waiting for inspiration, not needing an audience, not needing instant results. You do it, day after day, until those small decisions shape a great life. Lift your head and look at the journey you've walked. If you followed each step up to this point, reading, remembering, practicing, failing, starting again, then you are no longer who you were at the beginning. You are living proof of transformation, of the power of persistence, of faith in the journey without needing to see the entire road. And from this very moment, you can rise as someone who inspires, not through speeches, but through the quiet, steadfast, sincere presence that radiates from within. I did not come here to paint you a beautiful dream and then walk away. I'm here to tell you, everything you dream of can take shape if you're willing to take small, consistent, and intentional steps. You don't need a storm to prove who you are. You just need to quietly say yes to what is right each day, and you are already becoming the person you've always longed to be. Don't let today's procrastination steal a year of your life. Don't let a single negative emotion obstruct an extraordinary process unfolding quietly within you. And never let a temporary fear make you walk away from an eternal dream. I want you to leave this journey not just with a few tips or techniques, but with a new, deep, and irreversible awareness that you absolutely can create a proactive, meaningful, and radiant life with your own hands. No one needs to grant you permission. No perfect condition is required. You are already enough right here, right now. And from this point on, every day you live can be a new beginning if you dare to step forward with faith. And if there is one last thing I want to leave with you, not as advice, but as a rallying cry, it is this: stand up, begin again, take action. No matter where you are, no matter how many opportunities you've missed, no matter how exhausted you feel, you can still start over today with one small step. One good habit, one mindful choice, 1 hour for yourself. It doesn't have to be grand, you just have to begin. And remember, you are not alone. In every steady step, you are walking with me, with millions of others around the world, creating a wave of transformation, starting from within, rippling outward. A wave of people living with intention, acting with meaning, and refusing to give up on themselves. May you become the most radiant version of yourself. Keep the fire alive, keep moving forward, and if one day you find yourself lost, just return to one small action. That one action will lead you back to the light.